Something I would hope most people see as crucial is the idea of love and the idea of children. These two ideas fulfill, I believe, the greatest of action, actually. I talk a lot about action on this channel and what we can do actionably. This might not seem like one, this might seem very cheesy, this might not seem so realistic. And perhaps it's not meant to be. Perhaps there's a level of fantasy that is necessary, mystery necessary, to ask the questions that allow us to escape the reality that we're currently in, as we usually would say, imagination. And that allows us to really create something new. It's magic, magi. It's to create, and it is something that does exist through this lens. I have a deep, deep love for humanity. It doesn't really matter what happens. I find myself coming to this feeling again and again. Gut feelings, and I can't help but say for the fact that maybe I am a spiritual person, but it's just words. The feeling is there. And to describe that, I think the internal gratitude and love is there. That utmost of all. Spirit is something I like to observe and talk about. Spiritual is just describing a phenomenon, but the phenomenon itself is that of which I really like to look at. And we can all be our own philosophers. It's not about reading books, but rather being unique and speaking your mind. For do you think philosophers of the past read every book? They may have criticized each other, but when you keep going back down to the roots, you always find nature, you always find a sense of originality. You always find a sense of love necessary to fulfill the picture of life bringing. Love is always the missing puzzle piece to every equation. And the way I connect this with children is because I see so much sense of innocence and brightness that is overwhelmingly seen, that gives me too much inspiration to handle for the world that we live in. And yet, I see people dismissing this. And I see some people not really caring. But it's right in front of our faces. They're innocent, they're pure. They did no wrong. They mean no harm. They just want to have fun. The mindset of a child is so important, and I don't expect people to know it. Because they've grown away from the child. They've grown away from nature too. Because the child is with nature. It is more with at birth. Just as it is to be more with death. But death is not necessarily a bad thing if I can relate it to birth. It is not a bad thing if I can relate it to nature, because everything cycles. That's not to say everything doesn't matter. See, just because things have cycles, just because things happen often, things do happen, does not mean or presuppose a bad condition. We have these feelings with certain phenomenons that happen in our life, because of the surrounding elements. But also these feelings are not to be ignored. There's a sense of energy, always at work, that fuels whether it be the love or the presence, and then combine the presence and the love. And the child is in that scenario too, because when there's a death, you lack the presence. When there's a child, you create a new presence. All is a matter of presence, just as all is a matter of energy, all is a matter of love. The world is connected in such a way that people who like to come to conclusions quickly, so erratically, or so analytically, will fail to see so many of the inherently missing, important subjects, and also objective subjects that are, however, so present. Missing yet present, everywhere but nowhere. These ironies tell us everything. I say it all the time. We learn from irony. That is truth. It is what is and isn't. It is because what isn't also is. It's just a complex form, which is why people cannot understand it. And they're not supposed to be necessarily expected to. Because life will be learned no matter what. As long as people be present and they have a sensibility to care, then that's all that matters. It does not matter what we say or what we do, actually. Because as long as we can say and do originally, then we are expressing our nature. If we do so by compliance or by the lack of free will and just doing things without consciousness, without that sense of spirit or energy present and manifest and toward our own desires and having desires, we are no longer human if we cannot use those things. Children, I see, have a sense of wonder. They have a sense of question in them inherently by their existence. And that I don't see within the average adult, because they have things as if they think they figured everything out, but they have not either. The child is still within them, and that child is still expressing within them. You do have to find it in them, because they try to hide it. There's a lot of masks going on. I say masks are everywhere in society. That's one of my video titles, because there is a mask that goes beyond every mask. It just keeps going. There's layers on top of layers, presence on top of presence. And thus that creates life and existence, is the matter of energy building up and on top of layers in order to do so. If we were to see a spiritual sense of society, I would tell you the power structures that be would not exist. And I think any true person who understands that spirit, essence of such, in any regards of definition, would come to that conclusion. But they realize that not everybody has that spirit, which is why they say what they say and bring it to people. Not that they have to bring it to people. They don't have to do that. One does not have to do that. But what obligates one to do so? Perhaps it is a form of energy. Not all is done out of the name of ego or identity, but some and much of it is energy. Not all are controlled opposition and so forth. A lot of it is still energy. And energy going in different places can be misguided, can be misled, can be misoriented, there's a lot more innocent people than we think. Just as there is a lot of evil people, of course. But as you may notice, and if you were an influencer, this would be a key thing. The negative comments always reach the top. The wrong always shines brighter somehow than the good. Because we realize this good has some sort of inheritance. And that's why we might find it cheesy. What I'm saying, and this is something I've been hinting at a lot, is that there is this inherent skew toward goodness that human beings achieve and seek and desire, just as they do seek that objectivity, which helps them feel fulfilled, because they've completed the picture, and thus they can feel happy because they're whole. Just as whole means health, they also feel healthy. So that's why connecting dots is so important. That's why connecting with children is so important. And seeing the sense of wonder in them. That's where we ask questions. Do I approach things differently? Sure. Do I experiment? Yes. Does that take out the spiritual essence of who I am? No. Does that change because of my certain approach? Does that change the message? No. Does that change the truth? No. One may express things in a negative tone or an angry tone. Let me tell you, it actually doesn't matter. Could you believe that? It doesn't actually matter. People can sense and feel energy. Sure, they can feel anger. But that's coming out of the external. That's coming out of the outwritten. To look deeper is to know something internal is going on. Something is just a phenomena occurring with not much bias as to its good, relatively good or bad picture to other people. I don't expect certain podcasts like this, because I speak in such a way, to be interpreted like my other works that may be more interpreted by the average person. Some works are meant for certain people, some works are not. I deliver things in different ways, I experiment with different things, but ultimately I express who I am, and because of the vast world of many different ways of communicating and many different energies, am I supplementing for each form of those energies by placing myself within them? In a sense, you may see that. And I can see and make predictions that certain things can manifest. They're of certain attractions, may you say. And it may sound new agey to people just because I get too spiritual in that regard, but it isn't. Because if there's a basis to which I'm bringing things upon, it doesn't matter if it's this or that, spiritual or not. There's still a relative truth to it. And that truth inherently is spiritual. Everything is spiritual. To have that idea of deism is to see spirituality intertwined with the physical world, nature as a spiritual force. Nature as the answer. How often, when someone asks me a question, do I say nature is the answer? Not as much as I should. Not as much as I should or can connect, or should connect. But that is ultimately the intention. And it comes out through many different means, because I don't like to repeat myself. I don't have talking points. I am a human being. I am in the modern world. That doesn't change the spirit. That doesn't change the intention. That doesn't change the being. And that's the beauty. A child is to be embraced in the unique states, in their curious states, their questionative states, their being of wanting to find worth, in a world where worth is by many different means, not necessarily for spiritual growth or for personal growth. But they are sensing onto it, with good reason. They're sensing onto it, and they may get fooled by New Age philosophies. They may get fooled by different things. But they have a sense that is constantly attracting them to a nature. And that's why nature is always used to appeal to people. It is the force, the most powerful subject on this earth. There is nothing more powerful than nature. It's like saying the same for God, but I see this as even more than that. More than that, because it's the physical, it's the spiritual, it's all the gods, it's all the elements, it is everything. It is the being, it is their behavior, it is the object, it is the item, it is all natures, everything intertwined. It is the greatest of knowledge, never to be fully comprehended by human beings. But it's there. Because there's always a cause and effect, there can always be objectivity. And there always is also subjectivity. Because they're both, they're also none. Because there is that. However, we do need to come to some grounding. We need to come to some grounding to move ourselves forward in the evolution of humanity. I do see natural law as the force to truly bring on this evolution. And I do see myself as someone that will go down in history for sharing this knowledge, only because I put the time and effort into it. It's really just the knowledge, because of that itself being so powerful, and how it changes people's mindsets, and the very nature of its being. I can make these observations and say, yes, this is going toward history, undoubtedly. That one can talk about all these other subjects of the mainstream media, and I will firmly say that that does not matter and will do nothing for our future. You will be among the millions that didn't really have too much of an impact. If you're working a slave job, how much of an impact do you make after your time? And that's not to say you don't have worth, because I want you to see that you do. I'm saying that I love you. But do you express that love back? to the universe and to all things? Or do you ignore the fact that certain things are happening and feel like you're powerless and feel like there's no room for your voice and that you want to appeal to identity and ego? I want you to express who you are and not worry, and love all people and love yourself in order to do that. But that's not to be new age and all this other stuff you can throw on top of it. It is to simply be for what is. There's the truth, what is, and there's you who be. If you can be with what is, you are following the Tao. You are following the way. You are being of nature. And it is not at all to ever come up with some belief system or some ideology or some anything like that. And you are of the movement already, I say, because that's ultimately what's at play. And we need to use some of the physical to help bring people to the spiritual, because again, they're intertwined. We need to experiment and go outside of our boundaries to intervene, to cause a shift. It's only necessary that one takes the turn in order for the turn to happen. To show that this turn has to happen, it has to be shown in its progression, in its development. And tales will speak if the truth remains and the causes of the effects are known and understood, that through generations this knowledge is going to be passed and the truth will remain. We can remain in a free world without government, and it is 100% possible. And to know that it doesn't matter all that stuff, all those things. To know that you exist and you defend yourself and you are simply you and can live your best life. That should all what life should be about, if having fun, having care, and not having all these external issues. And so then you wonder why so many people internalize, why so many people go to that spiritual sensuality that they're sensing, why so many people lack that love, why people feed off of children. It is all for the reasons of the world that has manifested. And am I to say, yeah, it's because of the government? For many reasons I can. Unfortunately, I have to point to such a thing. But it ultimately then points to us. It is us. It's always been us. And it is not easy to wake up minds, to educate people. But the least we can do is have love and have this sense of mystery and exploration and thinking and always being human. I'm telling you, this is what it's going to come down to. It's a matter of robotics versus human beings. It's a matter of nature versus denaturing. That is the one true divide. Everything else is just of describing this divide, or a symptom of this divide, perhaps. But that is ultimately the divide. And you're not going to really hear that from anyone, I don't think. But I'm sure they have the same idea. They've also manifested it in different forms. And that is beautiful. Children see it too, I'm telling you. Even just out of birth, without any knowledge being given to them, they see it. They know it. Because they live it to some extent. And this world corrupts them. They adulterate into adults. It's funny we use that word, but that's what happens. Keep the child as the child. They don't have to grow up. They don't have to have all these responsibilities. That'll come to them naturally through time. They'll learn for themselves. But preserve what is true. Preserve that authenticity. And encourage their growth process. There's nothing harmful about that. What is harmful is still pushing ideas upon people. And people say, my child needs to do this, my child has to do that. Now you're running into another issue. Respect the child as an individual. They have rights. Respect them. You can help them in their direction because they may have underdeveloped prefrontal cortex. They may need help with making decisions, but that means you help them still. You don't tell them what to do. For that is always the path of knowledge. It's always the path that will excel too, is the path of knowledge. And when few decide to take that path and many do not, you're asking for control. When few keep that knowledge from other people, they're keeping their control. So the solution to the world is knowledge, and I say that often. But remember what comes first in natural law expressions: love. That's what creates children. That's what creates all things. And so, love, children, to knowledge, to action. I'm sure you can fill in other words, you can fill in other concepts. You can branch off to many different routes and avenues. But don't forget the children. Don't forget it. And know that we're all children. We're all one and the same. Thank you. I love you. I appreciate you. I appreciate everything that humanity does. And as much as I can get to such a degree like this some nights, it is important that I express it, because that's when the intuition is at its most awake moments, is when we're asleep, or close to sleeping, or close to reaching a different reality of a realm, known as the dream state, as the DMT state, as our deeper connection to ourselves and thus to the world around us. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. This is Cory Endrulat. You are doing both, watching and listening. You are sensing. Do sense, for you are human beings, and I hope this makes sense. I hope you make sense of this. I hope you have some sort of sensibility, because it is sense that is all. Sense us. That was my name that I used a lot for all my works before I started using Nature is the Answer. It is an important one. My music artist name I changed from Sensus to Zensus, Zensus. But indeed, sense all. Sense yourself. Sense us.